All right, ladies and gentlemen, so it looks like we do have the majority of the registered guests with us now. So we'll get started and hopefully we'll get a few more people come in. So thanks for joining us today. So the format that we will take today is more of an answer and question scenario. I'll be asking most of the questions. If you do happen to have any, we will have time at the end, but by all means pop them on the chat as well. So I'd also ask everyone to keep their cameras off and their microphones on mute until we go into our open floor questions later on in the session. So to start off with, I'd like to introduce a new team member that we've got at Vegetables WA. So Stephen Farrell is an industrial relations expert that's been contracted to help our members look through some of their needs in regards to award systems, contracts, handbooks, items like that, in order to improve our processes and services. So Stephen, would you like to give us a brief overview of your role?
Thanks, Melissa. Good morning, everyone. As Melissa just indicated, my name is Stephen Farrell, and I'm from my own business. It's called SJF Workplace Advice. So to give it a little bit of history, as Melissa's indicated, I've been contracted by Vegetables WA to assist them and their members in dealing with the industrial relations and human resources issues that crop up whilst employing staff. A bit of my background, I have a Bachelor of Commerce in Human Resources and Industrial Relations from Curtin University, and I've been working in this field for about 16, 17 years. I started off working in a trade union, the CPSU CSA, which is the State Public Sector Union. And then from there, I transitioned into work for employers. I started off with Serco as the head human resources director at Acacia Prison, and then transitioned into the consulting role with the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, West Australia. So I was there for 5 years before I left to start up my own business. I have dealt with a myriad of issues in relation to the employment space, from recruitments to the firing or dismissals of employees, redundancies, represented clients in both the state and the federal industrial relations commissions and full benches. So I'm here to provide that sort of service to Vegetables WA members, and I'm looking forward to working with everyone.
Thanks, Stephen. So you mentioned you've obviously got some experience from the East Coast, and then you've come across to Western Australia, because of course Western Australia is its own little island within our island. It is the only state that has not ceded its industrial relations system to the federal Commonwealth. So can you give us an overview of the difference between the two systems?
Sure. So the Fair Work Act is a piece of legislation that was promulgated by the Commonwealth Government using their powers under the Constitution to regulate corporations. So previously, the industrial relations systems were regulated by the states, and where there were issues across states or borders, then we had the Federal Industrial Relations Act and its predecessors beforehand. Now there is no choice. You either are, as an employment body, you're either a constitutional corporation, the most common is proprietary limited companies, or you are not. If you are a proprietary limited or a constitutional corporation, then you fall into the federal industrial relations system. If you are not, say for example, partnerships or trusts that are controlled by individuals and not companies, or sole traders, then you're in the Western Australian system. So the differences between the two is in legislation. They're very similar. We in Western Australia, of course, we know best for over here. So why cede our powers to those terrible people over East? And apologies for those who are here participating today from over East. But in essence, it's been the decision of successive governments from both Liberal and Labor that WA should retain their own system. So in the federal system of industrial relations, you actually have 10 national employment standards. They're cover things like minimum hours and annual leave, sick leave, or what's called personal leave, etc. Built on top of that is the award system. So what an award is an order or a decision of in this case, the Fair Work Commission, which regulates or provides conditions specific to an industry. So, for example, the Horticultural Award in the federal system covers and applies to those employers in that industry and their employees that are included in the classifications. In the WA system, you also have awards as well. They are awards that are orders of the West Australian Industrial Relations Commission, and they'll cover employers who are not constitutional corporations. Generally in industries, but you can in Western Australia have individual awards that cover a particular employer or not. The process is still the same. They contain terms and conditions relevant to that particular industry, and those terms and conditions are compulsory. So they sit on top of the minimum conditions of employment here in Western Australia, or the National Employment Standards in the Fair Work system. So, for example, in the horticultural industry, there is in the Horticultural Award, I apologise, and remember that's the federal award, there is a definition of harvest time. And there are certain conditions that apply to harvest time in the Horticultural Award and allow some extra hours to be worked by employees over and above, because clearly that's a very busy time for employers in that particular industry. The other aspect, Melissa, is that there is a new award, new Horticultural Awards, the Horticultural Award 2020. It comes into place on the 13th of November, so next week, I think, if my maths are correct. Before everyone jumps up and down and gets, hold on, this is new, and there's very little change. It's just a process. Awards have been under a review since 2014, and the Fair Work Commission are just finalising those processes and amalgamating all the different decisions that apply. So if you were to download the current 2010 version, you'll see very little difference in 2 weeks' time if you were to download the 2020 version itself. But that comes into place on the 13th of November. Here in Western Australia, there is, I think we've spoken before, Melissa, about the fact that vegetable growers are particularly not covered under an award. There is no award that seems to apply or have the scope for vegetable growers. But if you were in our friends in the fruit packing or the fruit growing industry, there is an award, the Fruit Pickers and Packers Award here in Western Australia.
So Stephen, they're the two main awards that most of our members will be following, the Horticultural Award and the Fruit Pickers and Packers Award?
Yes, that's correct. So,
and for our vegetable growers?
And for vegetable growers, well, that means that then vegetable growers in the Western Australian industry, so in other words, those who are not constitutional corporations, generally sole traders or partnerships, they are award free. So what that means for them is that it is only the conditions that are contained in the Minimum Conditions of Employment Act, which is a piece of West Australian legislation, and generally contains things like the annual leave, personal leave, those types of things, and the minimum wage. The current minimum wage in Western Australia is $740 per week. That's for a full-time person who's over the age of 21. That will rise on the 1st of January, sorry, the beginning of the first pay period on or after 1 January 2021 to $760 per week. To get the hourly wage, you just divide that weekly wage by 38.
So Stephen, does it look like vegetables will be included in the fruit picking award at any time, or should we be lobbying for our own award?
In Western Australia, there are what we call the Section 50 parties. So that's the Minister or whichever department they're particularly called now. Now it's the Department of Mines, Industry, Regulation and Safety. The department itself, Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Metals and Mines Associations and Unions WA can apply to amend the award at any time. In addition, the Commission could do so, as the West Australian Industrial Relations Commission could do so on its own motion, or an employer who is actually bound by that award could also apply to have the award amended on its through the West Australian Industrial Relations Commission. I'm not aware of any plans by the government, certainly not Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or very much doubt that the Mines and Metals Association would be concerned about the Fruit Pickers Award. So there are no plans that I'm aware of to include vegetable growers in that particular award. However, vegetable growers or even fruit growers themselves could apply, one employer or a group of employers could apply to the Commission to have that amended and include the vegetable growers. That the Commission will go through a series of consultations with, I would imagine, Vegetables WA and any other large groups or large employers within the vegetable growing industry. And then they will make that decision on that application on its own merits. If that decision by the State Commission were to include the growers, then the growers would become bound by that award. There would need to be a number of considerations that would have to be taken into account. So, for example, the fruit pickers and packers really is specific to fruit and picking and packing of that produce. So there are some things that would have to, well, if we were to include vegetables, then that might not apply to them in terms about the particular practical effects, and things like that would need to be taken into consideration. But I'd probably encourage, if vegetable growers were particularly interested or wanted to be included in the award, to either get in touch with me. I can certainly assist in representing them, or get in touch with their own industry associations like Vegetables WA.
All right, so you've briefly mentioned the award wages are increasing. Obviously the 1st of November was the first one, and then coming up in January. Do we have any specific figures on those, or do we know what the percentage was for the increase?
So the minimum wage is set each year, and it's set differently by the two different systems. In the federal system, there is a panel, a minimum wage panel, that consists of members of the Fair Work Commission, as well as experts that are appointed by the government onto the panel. They will then receive submissions from various parties. Anyone can make a submission. The main submissions come from generally both union, peak councils, and the employer bodies such as the Australian Chamber of Commerce or AIG, or even the Australian Mines and Metals Association. They will then consider the economics within Australia, the economy itself, and they'll make a decision as to whether or not, firstly, an increase is warranted to the minimum wage, and if so, what that quantum is. In Western Australia, it's a different process. The full court of the State Commission, so that's all the commissioners in the West Australian Industrial Relations Commission, will hold a hearing, normally in June. It's an adversarial process in which what I referred to before as the Section 50 parties, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Australian Mines and Metals Association, Unions WA, and the Minister, will make submissions orally and in writing to the West Australian Industrial Relations Commission. Again, the Commission will accept submissions from any interested person as well, and they can also appear at the hearing, generally not so. And then the Commission or the Commissioners will actually undertake the same process. So they'll receive evidence and submissions from economists and interested parties, and then make a decision. They are not bound to follow, although they generally become very close.
Okay, but the actual rates, that's probably more of interest to our members.
So as I mentioned before, $760 a week is the West Australian minimum wage, and that'll apply from the 1st of January 2020. And if I was just to get the Horticultural Award up, now that that is in place, and depending on the classification of the employee, just bear with me 2 seconds here. That will go up to approximately between $19.84 an hour or $753.80 a week, depending on the classification, to up to the maximum of $877.60 a week for a level 5 employee, which equates to $23.09. It's important to note that because the horticultural industry in the federal system is award covered, then it is the award rates that would actually apply, not the federal minimum wage. This year, the Fair Work Commission decided, because of COVID-19 and the effect that it had on the economy, that the increased the minimum wage and therefore the award wages wouldn't apply for most awards until November. And there are some awards where it's not going to apply until January for those industries who were very much affected by COVID-19. But in general, the increases are decided in June and apply from 1st of July.
Okay, so the Horticulture Award has gone from 1949, last award, up to 1984. Okay. So what are the implications for employers that don't follow the awards?
Okay, so there is actually very significant penalties in the federal system that are in place, but also in the state system as well, and the process is exactly the same. So employers that contravene or breach awards or minimum standards can face hefty fines. Both the federal system and the state system have regulators that are there to ensure that the legislation is followed. And the Fair Work Ombudsman, which is the federal regulator, is consistently monitoring and ensuring that employers throughout Australia and all industries are complying with their obligations for minimum conditions of employment. In addition, where necessary, they will prosecute. And if prosecuted, an employer can face a penalty of up to $55,000 each breach for a corporation, and an individual can be up to around about $14,000. The Fair Work Act actually provides that a person who is in control or is a decision maker within a company is also liable for penalties. And when the company itself breaches the Act, they also do as well, and so they can face penalties themselves. In Western Australia, it's a little bit different. It doesn't have the strict regime that the federal system does, but the Department of Mines, Industry Regulation and Safety do have industrial inspectors that can investigate and prosecute breaches of the awards in Western Australia and the Minimum Conditions of Employment Act. Both the department and the Fair Work Ombudsman have publicly made statements that the horticultural industry is an area that they are targeting over the next 12 months. It's an area where in Western Australia recently was found that it was rife, and I'm talking about the horticultural industry, of underpayments and breaches of minimum employment standards contained in awards and legislation. And in the federal system, there already has been successful prosecutions of growers, particularly in Victoria, which resulted in fines in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Remember that each breach can attract the fine, and if, for example, you were, as an employer, were underpaying an employee or employees by $1, then every time pay period, which is normally a fortnightly basis, that's another breach. The next pay period, another breach. The next pay period after that, another breach. So the fines can rack up very, very quickly and can be considerable. To be fair to the Fair Work Ombudsman, they're not that, and they certainly try not to be the monster that is out to get employers. They very much have a policy of education first, and I encourage anyone that's involved in the industry that feels that they may have breached either legislation or awards innocuously, I'm sort of certain, is to contact the Fair Work Ombudsman or the department, and they will assist. I certainly would recommend that vegetable WA growers and members access my services as well in assisting with that. Both the department and the Fair Work Ombudsman do, they try to educate first, and it's only the worst of the worst where they will go through and egregious breaches. For example, the 7-Eleven situation that we had a couple of years ago, where employees were marched to the ATM after being paid and forced to give their employer back the money that they had been paid. It's only in those situations where prosecutions are likely. Where there have been genuine mistakes, the Fair Work Ombudsman does recognise that it's a complex system and will work with employers to rectify those mistakes.
So Stephen, how long do employees have in order to make a claim if they think they've been underpaid and they want to contact Fair Work or the Department of Mines, Industry Regulation and Safety?
6 years. So 6 years from when the entitlement was due. But during the employment cycle, you obviously have things like annual leave, for example. You may be with an employer for 10 years and an annual leave accrues from year to year and continues on. You may have been your employer may have ignored its obligations for annual leave in the first year. Well, that would be 6 years from the end of employment. But if it was an underpayment in terms of being paid less than the minimum wage, and that happened in the first year and didn't occur in later years, then it's 6 years from then. So it's from when the entitlement becomes due.
So the big overarching question is, what can growers do to make sure that they're meeting their obligations and are compliant with either the state-based or the federal system?
Well, I encourage everyone to access services such as those that have been offered by Vegetables WA through me for a start. Secondly, in my partnership with Vegetables WA, I'm actually producing a suite of template contracts that can be used that we know are award compliant, and that will very much ensure that as long as they are being followed, that employers are complying with their obligations under the awards and the necessary legislation. The other piece of advice I would give to all employers is to educate yourself. Educate yourself. You don't need to have a great, being a great expert on the Horticultural Award or the Fruit Pickers and Packers Award, but educate yourself in terms of what are your obligations. And the other aspect of what you can do is that providing advice and using the contracts that we are putting in place is an efficient way to comply with your obligations as well. So when you know that you're complying with your obligations, you don't need to worry about are there going to be employees that come after you for tens of thousands of dollars from years ago, because you know that you're paying them properly and you know that you are complying with your obligations. They're the two pieces of advice that I'd probably give employers everywhere, but particularly in the horticultural industry, given that both the Fair Work Ombudsman and the department have publicly stated that they are targeting and are going to be looking very closely at these industries. I would encourage everyone to get your house in order if it's not, already now, rather than wait for the knock on the door. The Fair Work Ombudsman and the department have very wide-ranging and significant powers to enter workplaces and investigate breaches. The other piece of advice I'd give is ensure you're educated about the obligations, not necessarily in terms of money and payment, but records. You must keep records, for example, the date that an employee starts, the balance of their annual and personal leaves, records of when the employee has taken paid annual leave or paid personal leave. Those types of things are really, really important. The courts generally tend to look very unfavourably on employers who don't keep records, because by keeping records, you're able to be audited. And so the philosophy of the court generally tends to be suspicious. Why hasn't the employer kept records? It's probably because it knows it's underpaying and it doesn't want to get caught. So by keeping records, you can demonstrate that if you have made a mistake, that it was a genuine mistake and that can be easily rectified. But also, if you have complied, then you're able to easily show that you have complied. I've previously had history with clients who have been required by the Fair Work Ombudsman to provide records of pay and proof that the amounts have actually been paid. And in my experience, 2 of my clients have found that actually unintentionally underpaid their employees. What had happened in both cases, the award wage, minimum wage, went up in July, and they'd forgotten to pass on that particular increase. The results for both clients were from the Fair Work Ombudsman: fair enough, you've made a mistake, pay back the employee, fix your payment systems, and that's it. It's all done. There was no enforcement action, no fines, no breaches, or in any situation were they in any sort of trouble. Remember, the earlier that you can actually identify, and it comes back to records as well, the earlier you identify any mistakes, the less it's going to cost. So both employers were paying back tens of dollars rather than thousands of dollars to the employees.
So they're the questions that we kind of had straight up now. We've had a couple of questions pop up previously that some people have emailed through to us. So one of the main questions, and this is a regular one here in Western Australia, is if the labour hire provider falls under the federal system, but the actual grower is the state-based system.
So the employer, it will depend on who the employer or the employee is. Generally, in most cases, in the situation you've discussed, it's the labour hire company, that's the employer. So therefore, the rates of pay that will apply will be the ones in the federal system. Most, if not all, awards have terms contained in them that provides that the award covers labour hire companies who provide labour in the industry. So, for example, the Horticultural Award has a term that it also covers labour hire companies that are providing labour in the horticultural industry. And so the labour hire provider in those situations would be required and have the obligations contained in the award. Obviously, they will then pass that cost on to the client or the grower themselves. But it comes down to who is the employer. And if the employer is the labour hire company, then the federal system applies.
Okay. So the other question that we had was in regards to the seasonal worker program, which generally, obviously, that comes under my purview. So that was in regards to whether or not employers under the WA Industrial Relations System can access the seasonal worker program, the Pacific Labour Scheme. The answer to that is no, they cannot. Mainly for the fact it's not actually because they're paying under the state-based system. It's actually they need to be a PTY LTD in order to access the sponsorship through the immigration legislation. So if you are looking at utilising the seasonal worker program, you do need to be under the federal system and have a PTY LTD. We've investigated other options in that, and there's just no way around it. And like I said, it's not to do with the industrial relations, it's more to do with the Immigration Act. So they're all the questions that we had, dare I say, pre-prepared. If anyone has anything from the floor, burning questions that they would like to ask, please feel free to pop on your video and your mic, and then I'll call on you if you have anything specific. Nadia, lovely to see your face.
Hi, yeah, I'm just doing a bit of an article actually for the WA grower for my apple and pear growers, and I just wanted to go through whether my growers use the state or the federal pay award. So could you just just clarify that for me from my article? Is it if you have a constitutional, if you're a constitutional corporation, for example, Pty Ltd, you must follow the national one, and for partnerships, trusts, and sole traders, they come under the WA one. Is that correct?
Yes, that's pretty much, and in general, that will cover 99% of the situations. When trusts are involved, it gets a little bit murky. It depends on who's the trustee and who's controlling the trust, whether it's a company or an individual. But in essence, you are correct that if the employer is a Pty Ltd company, they're in the federal system. If they're not a constitutional corporation, then examples are sole traders and partnerships, then they're in the West Australian system.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say I think that the webinar's been really good so far, and I just think that, yeah, it's really important that we, you know, there's been a lot of press about in our industry not paying correctly. So, you know, if we're right on top of this, this is a good way that we can definitely counteract that bad publicity. So thanks again.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nadia. Brock, did you have, you turned off your microphone. Did you have a question?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, Joel? Joel, did you have any questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes. No, we've lost you again, Joel. Do you want to try again?
Just give me 2 secs. Back to the meeting. Back to meeting.
Wait on for a sec. I can go to Susie.
Yeah, have you got me now? You got me now?
Yes, I can hear you, Joel.
Perfect. Look, I just want to say really great webinar. Thanks, Steve and Melissa. I'm going to throw it out there and noting that Lucy and Marsha are on screen. I'd love to hear what they have to say in relation to all this stuff, and in particular Fair Farms. So yeah, I'm going to throw it out there and listen to everyone's response.
All right, I'll just get you to hold off for a minute. Stephen's just had some technical drama, so he's about to come and join me in the office. I'm just going to turn off my lovely background so that you'll be able to see him. And here he is here.
Still the chair. My apologies, everyone. Technical issues.
That's right. So, Marsha, did you have any more specific questions from GrowCom's side? I know you deal a lot with Kununurra.
Someone's got to raise the thing about piecework.
Okay. What was the question, Paquita?
Oh, did you hear me? Could we talk about payment for piecework?
Under the federal system or the state system?
We need to hear about both systems.
In essence, in the state system for vegetable growers, it's very difficult. I'd probably suggest that those, because they're currently award free, and there is ways, it's quite technical, I would probably need another 2 hours to explain it, in which the piece workers could be included. That would have to be a very specific type of, either on a commission-based situation, employment situation, or in essence having a contract of employment that's really have to be specifically drafted. In the federal system, however, the award actually does provide for piece worker rates and allows for the payment that is subject to performance. So the award actually provides for rates of that are paid per fruit picked or vegetable picked or those types of situations. That doesn't, for those of you who participate and you don't know what piece worker means, it means in essence you're being paid for performance. The more fruit you pick, the more you get paid, rather than on a time basis. So the award itself, the horticultural award, it does provide for those particular rates, and I would encourage employers to download that award. Make sure you do it after 13th of November, and then that actually provides the rates for it. in Western Australia, it's a very complex situation. I would probably need a whole webinar itself to
that is that I think this illustrates how hard it is for employers. In our simple way, we make sure that our piece workers are earning at least the basic wage if converted to an hourly situation. And in fact, they do better. They do better.
Yep, and that's a very good point that you've made there, Paquita. And I'll actually link it to my comments that I made earlier about changing the award. That's an area in which the employers can actually come together and make submissions to amend the award to provide piece worker rates. And I'm talking about the WA award here, not the federal one. So that these sort of situations can come in. So from that aspect, that's what my advice would be to actually take into account the practical realities of work in your industry. And in essence, that's really what awards are meant to be, is to provide the practical aspect of how work is performed.
All right, now you've said that we have a fruit picking award in Western Australia. Can you discuss piecework for fruit picking? We are vegetable growers, but could you talk about piecework picking apples?
Sure. Look, I don't have a lot of knowledge of the Fruit Pickers and Packers Award. In particular, my quick overview was that wasn't particularly covered or covered well. One of the issues that we have here in the West Australian system is a lot of these awards have been in place for, I think the earliest one I saw in the quick review was 1939 and have not been updated. The Commission itself has promised for many years to go through a process similar to what the Fair Work Commission have been doing the past 5 years of reviewing and updating those awards, but we're yet to have any movement on that apart from the awards where employers and employees or unions are active. So, for example, the largest percentage of employees that are in the WA system is the public sector, the state public sector I'm talking about here. And both the unions and the government or the departments have been updating on a regular basis that award. So if you were to download that, you would find it pretty much up to date. I can't say the same for a lot of the other awards. But Paquita, I'm very happy to have a conversation offline where I've got the Fruit Pickers and Packers Award and answer those specific questions if that's something you would like.
That's all right. That's fine. Thank you. I've got a grip of it.
Okay, Paquita, do you normally work off the horticulture or the state-based award?
Well, until next month, we're working off the federal, which is because we're a company. But when we lease the farm to a sole trader, this is why I'm attending the webinar. And of course, we need to be clear above the two systems.
Okay. And so, of course, the employer will be the sole trader when you lease the farm.
Yes.
That's right. So it will go back to the state-based system.
Yes.
Yes.
So Nadia has shared a really good video. I did actually look at it a little while ago. It's reasonably clear, but it does just deal with the Horticulture Award, the federal system. So it doesn't actually deal with the WA system, just as a note.
Yes.
So Joel's actually popped the question, if you're leasing the farm, is it even then your problem?
Yes, it is my problem. Well, I'm sorry, I'll keep going.
Because the other person will be the employer.
If I am passing on information to the lessee to make sure that our farm continues to prosper, it is our duty to inform the lessee of all aspects of our farm. And
if I could add on to that, you've also got, because you're a company, you've also got the accessorial liability issues within the Fair Work Act. So in other words, if you, and a really good example of this was Coles a number of years ago and the trolley collectors. Because Coles and Woolworths were driving down the price for the companies that employed the trolley collectors, it meant that they could not, those companies could not comply with their obligations to their employees. And both Coles and Woolworths were found to have been accessorial liability. So you're absolutely correct, particularly if you are involved with the lessee in the providing information, that you don't breach your accessorial liability obligations as well. So I agree with you.
right.
Okay, so Joel, did you, have you found us again now? Did you actually have a question? No, he's not coming up there. Okay, he's not, that's all right. Okay, did anyone else have any other questions? The floor is open. Oh, Joel, no, Marsha can't unmute.
You got me now, Melissa?
Yes, I can hear you now, Joel.
So my question is probably throwing it out there to you two and I guess Lucy and Marsha. But yeah, I was just wondering if you guys could touch a bit on Fair Farms in relation to the HR stuff, please.
Hi Joel, hi everybody. It's Marsha here from Fair Farms. Thank you so much for chucking it out there, Joel. And I too realise that it's really great to be involved with Veg WA in that we are based over here in Queensland and existing under the federal system and trying to roll out a national program of fairness to all workers, whether you're piece rate, whether you're minimum wage, whether you're, getting locals out there, whether you're an SWP. So it's a really exciting challenge. We're a year and a bit down the road and we're a young standard. So for those of you who don't know, Fair Farms is a standard that was written on the back of the Horticultural Harvest Trail Ombudsman blitzkrieg of inequities and exploitation that was happening. So a lot were prosecuted and everything had gone on to that led from that. So it's a standard that's benchmarked against law. So that's fun. It's benchmarked against fair work law. It's benchmarked against state laws. It's benchmarked against workplace health and safety laws. It's benchmarked against immigration. But at the heart of it is decency to workers. So we're just trying to shift the needle on treating workers with fairness that consumers expect and desire from our food supply chain. So I've come over from a food safety kind of QA point of view and knowing about the different legislation across the state. So I know this is going to be an ongoing discussion. I don't want to take up all your time here today, but just by way of introducing what Fair Farms is, it's a standard that starts at the heart of the grower doing an online self-assessment that is benchmarked to all of those bits of legislation that I mentioned. It's an honest, confidential self-assessment, so that doesn't go to the supply chain, doesn't go to the retailers, but what it does lead to is it forms their training needs analysis, in which we then recommend a certain amount of training with our deeply involved Hort people who, it's not that you'll come out of it with an HR degree or a level 1 in workplace on safety or anything like that. It's about confidence to pass audit. So our trainers talk with you, coach you, mentor you more so that you are ready to pass audit, because that's the ultimate exam. If you need certification, and it's not mandatory, but if your supply chain demands you to have third-party social compliance auditing of that system to meet their ethical supply arrangements, then you can do that with the third-party auditors. So it's online self-assessment, training element, third-party certification to give demonstration of ethical compliance with retailers, of which we've got the three majors accepting Fair Farms as meeting their ethical compliance obligations. So we look forward to having an ongoing relationship with all of our state peak industry bodies, because you know your industry is best. We know it's really confusing for growers. We know growers are really under pressure. It would be nice if consumers can pay more money for the expectations that we all have, so as not to put another layer of pointless, auditing or bureaucracy. So I look forward to using you up, Steve, in that we've got lots of questions, but I didn't want to take that on today. I do have one question though, because we have more than 200 participants now, more than 19 is my stats as of August, but anyway, 19 come from WA, and we're managing to kind of get through in that they don't necessarily need that certification at the end. Anyway, it's a little bit of, it's touch and go, but could you tell me what's the expected outcome and timeframe from the updates to the state industrial relations system?
Yes, actually I can, because I've just recently, on behalf of HWA, participated in an industry lobbying body that was led by the Master Builders Association. There are two pieces of employment legislation that are before the Parliament at the moment here in Western Australia. I mean West Australian Parliament, not Australian. And one is regarding the rewrite and the new workplace health and safety laws. Though that bill has actually been passed, legislation has passed both houses of Parliament and is currently before the Governor to be assented, if it hasn't already. The new industrial relations system laws, for those of you in the eastern states that may not know this, a particularly detailed review was conducted last year in 2018-19 by Mark Ritter, who's a barrister over here, and he made a number of recommendations, one of which was to totally overhaul.
Can you respond to Joel?
Sorry?
Beg your pardon, sorry.
Okay. To totally overhaul the Industrial Relations Act here in Western Australia. Now that's currently before the upper house, is my understanding. There is moves afoot to try to have that sent to committee for review of a committee, but I'm not sure where that's at in terms of the process at the moment. WA Parliament is currently sitting, so it may be within, looked at within this current sitting period. If not the next one, it's certainly a priority for the West Australian Government. I'll probably need a whole new webinar itself to go through what those particular changes are, but it is going to completely shake up industrial relations over here in Western Australia.
So just another question that has come through. Marsha, is the Fair Farms training able to be adapted for Western Australian state-based employers? Okay. Marsha, you're having issues unmuting again. Oh, she's stuck on mute again. Did you want to type it in the chat then? I can read it out.
I think Lucy's made an answer here.
Okay, so the state-based systems can go to audit, but due to the nature of the standard, we cannot certify these businesses. Okay, all right. But yeah, because obviously that's just the difference in the training between the state-based. Thanks, Lucy. All right, so we had one from there. Nadia, you went back onto video just before. Did you have something else to comment? Was that in regards to the piece rates for the apple for the fruit industry? No? Technical drama is happening again, but that's okay. Yes, all good, exactly. So obviously the standard for the horticulture industry with the piece rates is that the workers are paid 15% above the award wage. If they are working on a piece rate, that's what's considered to be competent. The key issue with the piece rates is that records are kept to demonstrate exactly who is reaching award and who is not, and then potential adjustments need to be made. And of course, those piece rates need to be decided on a regular basis with agreement with the workers. Okay. Marsha, you're off unmute. You're unmuted now. Did you have something else?
I'm off unmute. Yes, that makes sense. I am excited to know that you have Steve as a resource there, because we would like to put a workaround. We've kind of been waiting, oh, the legislation's coming, oh, it's not. But if we don't have a definitive time frame, I'd really like to work around that, because it's becoming, we first only had one ready for certification, one grower ready for certification, and we were able to work around that because they didn't, but it would be nice to find a proper solution if we can't get it in laws.
Look, I can't give any sort of definite time frames. I think
no, but if we can look at how our standard is written and work around, we'll get there.
All right, so we'll finish it off there. What I can do is encourage people to contact Stephen here at Vegetables WA. He is definitely a resource that obviously can be utilised. We do know that labour is a major issue, obviously everywhere in Australia at the moment. But this is also then the potential time to make sure everything's being compliant and being followed. We, like Stephen did mention, we do know that Fair Work have said that they're going to be concentrating on the horticulture industry. There have been recent reports in regards to underpayments and fines and issues here in WA, and obviously we are very much aware of that, and we want our industry to obviously be as compliant as possible. We do think that there is the possibility that there will be, dare I say, more oversight because of the current labour issues that are happening. So it is something to obviously spread the network far and wide. Stephen is available. If you do have any specific questions, please by all means let us know on email. We will be sending out a one-page document with the questions and answers in regards to this webinar, and some of those links to the video and to the state-based award systems, just so that you can find them quickly through the links to the Horticulture Award and the state-based system as well. It is quite a technical area, and we certainly understand that, and we look forward to doing something again soon.
And from my part, thanks, Melissa, for moderating this webinar. I hope it's been informative for everyone, and I'm sure we will receive feedback either way. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks so much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next time. It has been recorded and it will be passed out with our e-news and also on our YouTube channel as well.